Okay, so today I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to show you three good trades and one trade that had good data, but wasn't necessarily something you should stay in. It it ends up being a wash, but at the same time, the goal here is for me to be able to show you the types of trades based on the data and how you can know that it is not necessarily a good trade to hold. So the first trade starts out right out the gate. So we start out right here. The upside score jumps from 15 all the way to 35 and the downside drops from 15 to negative 1. So the first trade is right here. So that entry would be 45.69 half. The reason for getting in based on the data is you have 4 new highs for the upside, 4 lows for the downside, while the lows for the upside and the highs for the downside are less. In this case, it's not significant, but at the same time, this would be a trade where you would obviously keep your stop pretty tight. So this trade takes approximately 1 point of heat, but on the way as the upside score is continuing to increase, we're making new highs, the downside is making new lows, as well as the market is moving in the right direction. We get to the point where the exit for this trade is 41. So right here. So the upside drops from 47 to 42. The downside increases just slightly. And there are multiple candles with sideways movement. So there's 3 or 4 candles in here. Clearly, you would just exit somewhere up here based on 3 candles of sideways movement. That is definitely an indication of it slowing, potentially a reversal or a retracement. So you don't necessarily want to stay in trades too long. Okay, trade number 2 is at 9:51. Right here, the upside score is 52 and drops to 40. So this would be your entry point right here. This one would be to the downside. So you would enter in that candle right there. Your entry point would be 45.73. Because the scores are moving in the correct direction, the market is going in the correct direction. This would be a point right here where you start to see a full retracement of a 1-minute candle, of a fairly large candle, would be a good indication. This would be the short exit. It doesn't come back to your entry, so this would potentially be something you could still stay in. This would be your exit right here. And that exit right there is approximately 45.65. So an 8-point trade from 45.73 down to 45.65. Again, I am choosing pessimistic entries and exits. So the worst possible entry based on the candle that I was pointing out, and the worst possible exit based on the candle that I'm pointing out. So that would be your exit, or you could hold on into here. Now, here is where things go a little bit sideways, and it's the sideways more than 3 candles that you would potentially get out. I would say that this right here at 10:06 would be the exit right here. I'm going to pick, yeah, right there. So that exit, and as you can see, they're all pretty much the same. So your exit would be roughly in that general vicinity. Your exit would be 45.59. So from 45.73 down to 45.59 for a 14-point trade. The next trade, they kind of move around just slightly, nothing really substantial, no significant movements, but right here things go a little bit more dramatic. So the upside score goes from 22, and the data is still to some degree supporting the upside because of the weakness for the downside. So the number of lows for the downside is still high. We jump from 22 up to 37 for the upside, and we go from 28 down to 14 for the downside. So substantial movement. Now, this is the trade that I'm going to point out, which is potentially not the best trade overall, but the data still to some degree is showing that that trade is a decent trade. So you get into the trade here. So your entry is about 45.68 half. Now, as you can see, it is starting to make new highs for the upside, but you can see that there is only one new low for the downside. And the other thing is there are lots of sideways candles. This would be a trade that I would bail on pretty quickly just because it doesn't seem to be making any significant progress in the right direction. The exit for me for this one would be about 1040 because you get a drop. So even though you're moving up, you get a drop here from 53 to 46. The downside, and this is the other thing, the downside score is steadily increasing. Not a good sign. So the exit for this one would be right here at 1040, which would be right there. So you're basically either getting a half point or you're getting a wash. I mean, it's somewhere in that general vicinity, but at the same time, not a really solid trade, not a trade that you want to stick around for. Next trade is at 1045. So at 1045, you're seeing a slight decrease of the upside score, but the downside score has been steadily increasing. And at this point, we have gone from a negative 11 to positive 10 for the downside. So this would be the potential entry for this trade, 1045, which gives you an entry of approximately 45.69. Again, the downside score is increasing and finally crosses over the upside score. This one would be again where you start to see either a retrace, and it would be a matter of how long, how far you're willing to allow it to go. It doesn't necessarily take that 1 minute candle out, but it does start to do a lot of sideways trading. And in this case, I would choose an exit of about 10.58. Right here would be the exit, which would give you an exit of 45.62. Again, I'm choosing a pessimistic exit for a 7-point trade. That's just to give you an idea. Now on the NQ, it's very similar. Same kind of thing. So your entry is going to be here in this candle for the NQ, which gives you an entry of 16,101. And you would ride this along. Again, we start to see movement, a lot of sideways trading. So I would definitely say that this up here would be a point where you would exit. You get a full retracement of some of those candles. So your exit would be, I'm just going to choose the same one that I had chosen for the other one at 941. So your exit would be right here. That exit is approximately 16,143 for 42 points. Next trade is at 951. Again, we have the market score dropping. So at 951, your entry would be here at 16,106. You would ride this along until you get, and again, we have the short exit, which is at 957. This is the short exit for at 16,047 for 49 points. Or if you held through, it doesn't come back to your entry. You held here, you see that the candles are going sideways again. At this point, you would want to get out 10:06. So this exit is 16,033 for 68 points. Trade 3 is the one that you would get in and potentially the information would not be great to hold on. Starts right here. So your entry would be right there at approximately 16,078. This one takes 10 points of heat. Again, a good signal to not necessarily stay in the trade, but at the same time, I'm trying to point out the information that would potentially have gotten you in the trade and reasons why you should potentially get out as well. This one, the exit would be 1040 because you would be writing it in here. Again, lots of sideways movement, good information for reasons to get out. So 1040, so you would get out up here. This one would probably on the NQ would either be a slight loss or a wash, roughly. Next trade is at 1045. You can see that the upside is starting to move down. And again, we have that significant movement for the downside up. So even though the upside is basically flat, downside is consistently moving up. And we would be getting in at 1045, which would be right here. So that would be the entry. That entry is approximately 16,079. You would ride this. The downside is continuing to move up. You start to see sideways movement in here. And then once you get into here, these candles are relatively at the same height. But I put my exit at 1058. So this exit right here would be 16,043 for 34 points. So there are additional trades throughout the day. You can see right here where potentially it's coming up, and you would potentially get into a trade here and ride it up to here. But at the same time, I'm just trying to give you some ideas of how you would read this data and use this data to determine when to get in and when to get out of trades. And those are the trades for yesterday.